welcome back to another video. We have all the energy today. I am recording on a Tuesday, so I'm still looking really tired, and before I start, I do want to say that I need you to ignore this tiny little sticker because I have a scar on my nose and it keeps breaking and it keeps like being weird and disgusting, and I want it to look like a snack today because it's no hijab day. Well, not today, but Saturday. It's no hijab day, so I want it to look like a snack. But yeah, this scar is just really killing my vibe. Anyways, it is no hijab day today. It's also World Hijab Day today, 1st of February. Welcome. And to preface this video, do you guys remember the time when I got really angry about people defending slavery, like Muslims, specifically Muslims, but also Christians and other people defending slavery, and I went off on like an hour-and-a-half long rant about how slavery is wrong and I didn't know why I needed to do that. And then a couple of months down the line, I got equally, possibly even more frustrated about people. This video is going to be so demonetized. People went out of their way to defend pedophilia, and I made like an hour-long video ranting about that and debunking every single argument that people had for that. Well, today, I'm not angry, but I am extremely disappointed because I came upon, I don't want to show the first page, but a speech of mine that I wrote in secondary school, all about the hijab and why it's a wonderful thing. And I think I took it too far. It's not very inspired. It's a little bit inspired as far as religious preaching goes, and I wanted to read it out and I wanted to debunk myself. I don't know how narcissistic that's coming off as, but we are going to bring out oh, that was awful. We are going to be bringing out fundamentalist Faye for this. I'm not going to wipe off all this makeup because honestly it took way too much time to do and I didn't really think it through. I just wanted to look good for this video, but you know what? I'm gonna show you. That's enough talking. I'm gonna do some showing. Ahlan wa sahlan, ya audience. I don't know how to say audience in Arabic. I'm sorry, I don't speak Arabic, but this is fundamentalist kind of Faye. I didn't want to wipe off my makeup. I don't have my niqab because I burned it many years ago, and I don't have my jilbab anymore because I cut it up and I made it into other things. But welcome. This is fundamentalist Faye. She is my inner Salafi, just my residual Muslimness that has remained in me since leaving Islam, and I don't ever think she's truly going to leave me. But when I read Islamic things, there's two thoughts that go through my head. There's my normal self, who is now an atheist and regards everything as absurd, and then there's the Salafi me, who likes correcting Islamic things. So, ijlisi, while I read this, that means sit down. You're gonna need to sit down. I'm gonna put on my glasses and really embody. I haven't even seen myself. Oh, this is giving me PTSD. Oh, this is a mistake. And I also don't have my arms covered. This is a mistake. I mean, I still look hella fine in the face, but oh, I'm getting PTSD. This is really bad. Okay, so I remember so the story behind this, and it kind of fits into the thing that I'm doing right now. I need to not look at myself in the camera. I don't even know how I'm going to edit this later because I do want to edit this video. Alicia's going to see this and she's going to laugh because she met me in a hijab for the first time. Anyways, when I first wrote this, I remember because my school was absolutely terrible and we never learnt anything, we, as a school, needed to come in during the holidays to do some extra study because everybody was fucking failing in my class because my school was fucking awful. Don't send your kids to an Islamic school. Anyways, if you want them to succeed in life or have any grades or have any aspirations besides becoming a housewife and being a broodmare for their husbands. Okay? Okay. Anyways, in the holidays, they had like some free periods where people had, like teachers had either cancelled or there just wasn't much going on. And instead of just being like, oh, you can have that free period to do whatever you want, you know, you go have some fun, do some shit. No, they were like, Faye, I wasn't called Faye back then. Faye, we need you to ruin everybody's free time with some religious preaching. And I was like, listen, I'm not your average preacher, okay? I make things interesting. And I asked them, what do you want me to talk about? I was one of the most religious girls in class, okay? Maybe not the most religious. We also had the daughter of an imam who was in our class. So I wasn't the most religious, but I was one of the most religious girls in my class. And so they asked me to speak about this, and I never really had a passion for speaking, but I did have a passion for writing. So I wrote this entire speech out, and I showed it to my then headmistress, and she said, you have to present this. And it was, I had an hour slot, and the slot was called The Zombie Repellent, and that is what the title of this lecture is. I'm not, it's just really watering down the definition of lecture here. But I'm going to read this out, and then I'm going to take this off, and we're going to scrutinize the fuck out of this. So, I want you to imagine that you are standing in a dark room. Just an average, normal room. There's no light bulb, no candle. There's just a small window, about as big as your hand, shedding some meager light. You are standing in the center of this room, but there's just one small problem. There's this constant groaning, emerging from 1,000 mouths. 1,000 people are surrounding you in this room, their arms outstretched, aiming to get to you, to tear you apart. Have you seen Resident Evil or Dawn of the Dead? If you have, then you'll get a pretty good image. Lucky for you, these zombies are slow and the room is quite spacious, but they'll come in on you eventually. This is just... Where are you going with this, Faye? That's like I swear to God, this must have been like every single one of my classmates from the youngest year to the oldest must have been like, where are you going with this? But they'll close in on you eventually. How do you feel? How do you feel? You're in a room full of zombies. You don't know the way out. You don't know if there is a way out. You're stuck in this room, and eventually they're going to close in on you. And of course, you don't want to be zombie chow. Zombie chow. I'll say that again. Zombie chow. But what are you going to do? What is there to do? They're gonna... okay, just a side note, just to take you out of it for a second. I kept writing gonna, I don't know if you can see that, instead of going to. Like, it's really... oh, it's terrible writing. I'm so disappointed in you. They're gonna devour you, piece by piece, and there's 1,000 of them. That's a lot of pieces. And you know what? It's free. That's a good... sorry. Oh, and I forgot to tell you, you don't have a gun to shoot yourself with, much less anyone else. You've got no laces or a belt to hang yourself with, and you don't carry a knife because you are such a good citizen. Any ideas? This is a Dora the Explorer moment where I allow you to talk and give me your suggestions. Okay, back in the room with the zombies, as if we went anywhere. You didn't notice before because of the dark, and the worry, and the confusion, but there is a table beside you. On that table is the solution to your problem. If you use this solution, then all the zombies will leave you alone. They won't even notice you. You'll be able to get out of the room safely and in one piece. On the table is a set of clothes. Do you see where this is going now? The only problem is that these clothes are so hideous, so grotesque, and so atrocious that a dead rat wouldn't wear it. A dead rat. I'm going to ask you, to save your life, would you wear it? And it says, allow audience response. Like, what are they going to respond to that? You're in a zombie... Just keep reading. But your quest isn't over. You found the door. There's a door now in this room that only had a window. You escaped from this dark room. Oh, you escaped from this dark room, but there are the undead lurking outside this room as well. If you continue wearing this outfit, then you will go unnoticed and you will be untouched. But you even think of taking it off, and the whole zombie population will be after you. And you don't want that. So you have to wear it all the way home, where you will be safe. Are you going to do it? Again, allow audience response. Okay, so you decide to wear the costume, because what were a bunch of Muslim girls really going to say? No, I'm not going to wear the costume. Come on. Well done. Unfortunately, this zombie attack isn't always so obvious, realistically speaking. In reality, these dangers are always present and we tend to ignore or just not notice that they are there. In reality, danger is everywhere. When you hear about those people who get attacked on the streets in the news, they are never expecting it. They are always, and I mean always, caught by surprise. And sure, the criminal may be put to justice, but that doesn't turn the person's life back to normal, as it used to be. So there is a real costume that has been prescribed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from these dangers. Although they need to be, they need not be so, grotesque. Can you tell that I was a literature student? Like, from reading this, can you fucking tell? Like, ooh, so annoying. I'm so embarrassed. Listen, I did a whole live stream where I read out my actual creative work that I've been doing in the last 3 months, but this is like high-key embarrassing because I wrote this when I was like 14, maybe 15. Oh, so I don't want people to suddenly think, oh, she's such a hack. Like, there's no way this is the same person. Like, all that wonderful creative stuff she did, that can't be her. Look at her work. It's so bad. Anyways, getting back to this nasiha. It has many benefits, and it is a practical way of solving the problems that are most rampant in the West. This is called the hijab. You're probably thinking, well, of course she's going to say great things about the hijab, since she's a walking postbox herself. Okay, fine. So I do wear the full hijab. But I was a girl who used to question everything once upon a time, as well, and I still do. That's how we got here, bitch. That's how we got here. So fucking stupid. It was after I found out so many benefits for the hijab that I realized what a huge blessing it was. So let's start off with the historical positions of women in great civilizations. Let me tell you, it's all negative, except when we come to Islam. That's just spoiling it. You know what? The rest of it, I'm just going to read it without making commentary. As difficult as that is for me right now, you have to be in my shoes. I am trying so hard not to embarrass myself while I'm embarrassing myself. It's really difficult not to commentate. This is the last time. I'm just going to read through it because we need to get on with this, and I talk too much. I'm so fucking angry at myself. In the Babylonian civilization, women were denied all rights. If a man murdered a woman, his wife was put to death. In the Greek civilization, which is famous for the creation of art and philosophy, the civilization contributed to so many scientific theories and thinkers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. It was one of the greatest civilizations in history. However, women were also deprived of all rights. The Greeks, who invented an imaginary woman by the name of Pandora, was the cause and the reason for all misfortune and all evil, which included death, disease, plague, etc. In the ancient Greek society, women were seen as inferior, and prostitution was very common. In the Roman civilization, known as one of the greatest civilizations to ever exist, and gave rise to great leaders like Julius Caesar, my girl, a man had the right to take the life of his wife without any reason. Prostitution and nudity, with a capital N, was also very common in Roman society. In the ancient Egyptian civilization, home to the Sphinx, the pyramids, and the ancient pharaohs, women were seen as a sign of evil and the devil. In pre-Islamic Arabia, you should have learned from your seerah lessons, which is the lessons about the life of the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When a female child was born, she would be buried alive. Women were inherited against their will, meaning that a man could marry a woman by force, regardless of her age. As if that changed. I need to stop. And then Islam came. It was the first time that women had gotten all the rights that they deserved. They were allowed to be educated and work. They were given inheritance rights. They were given family rights. They were given marriage rights. And they were given protection through the divine guidance of Allah, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Praises be to Him. You're probably thinking, here we go, the bragging about how great our religion is starting. I actually wrote that in this piece. You can think what you like, but you just heard how women were treated in the past, and what sort of relief that Islam had brought. God Himself gave you these rights, so who are you and I to deny them? The Quran 24:30-31 says, say to the believing men that they should lower their gaze and guard their modesty, and say to the believing women that they should lower their gaze and guard their modesty, that they should not display their beauty and ornaments except what ordinarily appears thereof. This is God speaking to you. When you get the chance to speak to a celebrity, or even see a celebrity, it is such a great honor. Yeah, you are not speaking to God here. The one who created everything that you see is speaking to you. I'm so proud of myself. How great an honor is that? That He chose scum like us to speak to. And returning to the subject, notice that the hijab for the men is mentioned before the hijab for women. So what is hijab? Hijab has basically 6 criteria. Firstly, the length differs for men and women. For men, the minimum that should be covered is from the belly button to the knees. For women, everything should be covered except the face and hands. Fair is fair. You know, but you want to know why? But even in Britain, the minimum covering differs between men and women. But in Islam, the sentence makes no sense. I'm moving on. But Islam isn't the only one that demands for women to cover themselves. It says in the Bible, get fucking roasted. It says in the Bible, if a woman does not cover her head, she should have her hair shaved off. And if it is a disgrace for women to have her hair cut or shaved off, she should cover her head. You see? So stop thinking that we are some sort of outcast in society, because Christians are also supposed to wear the hijab. The second criteria for hijab is that it should be loose and not reveal the figure, because only a whore would... Sorry. The third criterion is that the clothing should not be transparent or see-through. It should not be extremely glamorous. It should not resemble the opposite gender. So none of that cross-dressing bullshit. It should not carry customs or symbols of the disbelievers, so y'all best not be carrying around a cross or a Star of David or some shit. Alongside all of this, the hijab also includes moral conduct and behavior. Adab, ikhlas, all of that garbage that they... I'm moving on. It's not ikhlas. Ikhlas is not what I meant. I'm losing my touch. Probably a good thing. Meaning, if you are to truly wear the hijab, you should also act accordingly. There is hijab for the eyes, meaning you should lower your gaze. There is hijab for the tongue, abstaining from backbiting. There is hijab of the ears, don't listen to music. Hijab of the thoughts, abstain from having ill thoughts about others. So that's hijab for you. Plain and simple. Such a simple thing to abide by. How it came, what it is, and how you're supposed to wear it. But there are many more benefits to the hijab than just this. I'm going to report some statistics from 2009 to you, and you tell me what you think. So I really was 14 or 15 when I wrote this. Number 1, France, 10,277 cases of rape. Germany, 7,292 cases of rape. Spain, 2,437 cases of rape. Sweden, 4,901 cases of rape. And apparently Swiss cheese, which is not the UK, this great country of ours, 13,489 cases of rape. The US of A, another great country, 89,000 cases of rape. From the same year, here are some more statistics. Egypt, 87 cases of rape. Maldives, 9 cases of rape. Oman, 183 cases of rape. Syria, 157 cases of rape. Now you may think that these statistics are biased and probably made up. But believe it or not, these statistics came from UN reports. Similar stats can be found on the Amnesty International website. But what does this show? It shows that the hijab gives you results. It's practical. I'm going to put forward another scary fact that will portray to you the real situation of zombies. In 2007, only 4 years ago, it was 2011, that means, there was a BBC report on the 12th of November. The report stated that 85,000 women had been raped that year. That's the equivalent to 230 women per day, 9 women per hour. I'm not clear if the maths is okay, but feel free to correct me below, because the rest of this is garbage anyway. And guess how many rapists were convicted? Only 800 rapists were convicted. 85,000 rapes took place, and only 800 rapists were convicted. If there was 1 rapist per rape in the situation, do you know the percentage of those who were convicted? Again, I'm not clear on the maths, but this is the percentage that's written here. It's 0.009%. Literally, this figure is 0. There is literally a 0% chance that the criminal would be caught and convicted. In other words, the zombies would eat you and no one would know, much less care. To think of it, if enforcing the Islamic hijab, where every woman has to cover everything except her face and hands, and every man has to lower his gaze, you would get results. The chances of molestation and rape would be 0, or at least negligible. On top of this, according to Sharia law, if a man rapes a woman after all the hijab has been observed, he gets the death penalty. Which sane man would take that chance? So in order to be safe from zombies and survive, we must apply the solution. In real terms, we must wear the hijab. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, glory be to him, in all his majesty, has established it for our own benefit. Hijab is a blessing. It is a real solution. It is a passive guardian. And remember, if you're going to rebel and not wear it, that's your decision. It's at your own risk. It's only going to affect you and not Allah. Allah doesn't need you to wear the hijab to stay powerful. It is you who needs the hijab to stay dignified. And remember, Allah says that it may be that you may like a thing that is bad for you and may dislike a thing that is good for you. Does that make sense? So with that, I conclude my talk, and if there are any questions, feel free to ask. I'm taking this fucking thing off. Please welcome my hair back onto the scene. It's... Moving on, we are going to dissect this wonderful talk that I just gave. Possibly too loudly. I don't know if I absolutely disturbed your day and your whole life and everything in your personal being. I will never subject you to that again, but hey, this is going to be on the internet forever. Anyways, we are going to be dissecting my terrible fucking speech. So, I think that I got this idea to make this comparison between zombies and men, essentially, which is extremely offensive, but we'll get into that. I think I got into this because I wanted to make an interesting talk. I didn't want to just go, like, start with God and end with God. Like, I wanted to start with something else and then lead into it. And I definitely did try to keep my audience interested, because we were in an Islamic school and, sorry, my plaster's like moved. We were in an Islamic school and there was no shortage of people talking about the hijab. Like, there just wasn't. So I didn't want to make it like super bait and super obvious and just talk about religion the entire time, when I could, you know, ease people into the subject. And I can't remember the exact inspiration for why I was writing this, like why I made this comparison, but I think my child mind, who'd never really integrated with men outside of my family, like never really interacted with them, I barely even rode the bus with them, I think this is how I viewed like all men, that they were just these disgusting creatures who wanted to molest us all the time, instead of just viewing them as actual human beings who had minds and thoughts and could control their actions. So I think that that's what my mentality was at the time, that I literally thought that men were these horrible, awful things that would just absolutely destroy me, would gut me, would kill me, would do something to me if I did not wear my hijab and it did not protect me. I think other very poignant quotes, poignant quotes from this speech that kind of describe my mentality is the quote, "In reality, danger is everywhere." So this like fear mentality of everything around you. And yeah, another one is, how great an honor is it that he, God, chose to speak to scum like us. Another amazing quote is, let me see if I can find it. I should have made a list. There was one more, I'm pretty sure. It's at your own risk if you don't wear hijab, as if like a threat. Like something's going to happen to you and you're going to deserve it. And the last and final thing that I want to say about my mentality at the time is that there's actually a verse in the Quran that states that it may be that you, addressing the reader, may like a thing that is bad for you, and may dislike a thing that is good for you, but Allah knows best. And that's a general gist of the verse. I don't know it exactly, but that's the general gist of the verse. So now that fundamentalist Faye is in the garbage over there, we're going to be dissecting this point by point. So the first point I kind of made was the historical positions, where I talked about the Babylonians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Egyptians, and prehistoric Arabia. I'm not the most well-read on the position of women in these societies, but I do remember this being stated in a Zakir Naik lecture, like all the things that I said about that stuff in this talk. He said the same shit. It was very uncreative of me to go and plagiarize that, but he's garbage anyways. So what I will say though is that after I started actually studying history, like studying history in A-level, where I started learning about Anglo-Saxons and Vikings, I learned about civilizations that did treat women way better than these civilizations and way better than Islam. For example, Anglo-Saxon women could own property. Viking women were shield maidens and could fight just like men. You know, Spartan women, who, you know, are neither Viking nor Anglo-Saxon, were taught to hunt and fight, and you know, they wore short things, and they would tend the fields, and they would learn to do all this like cool stuff. Like, yeah, Sparta had its downsides. I'm definitely not for a militarized state, but to say that every single civilization was terrible before the advent of Islam or without the guidance of God is a little ridiculous, because there is evidence of societies who treated women quite well. And then the stuff I said about pre-Islamic Arabia, and this always ties in whenever Muslims talk about women and women's rights in Islam. They always bring up pre-Islamic Arabia, and how people would bury their daughters alive. I've yet to see a citation that doesn't originate from an Islamic source about this. And unfortunately, many of the sources about pre-Islamic Arabia are from Islamic sources, which are not the most favorable. It doesn't paint the most favorable picture of pre-Islamic Arabia. But I will say this, because people love to shame women for having sex. If a woman had sex with multiple partners and she got pregnant, she could round all of those men up and choose a father among them without actually knowing who the father was. And to me, I find that extremely empowering, because instead of being tied down to a man that got you pregnant, you can choose a man who is most fit to raise and look after that child, and someone you actually want to be with. Or even if you didn't want to be with them, you could find someone who was capable of raising that child, rather than just, you know, being saddled down to whichever man was actually the father. So I have my doubts that that was something they actually did. I have my doubts, but, you know, I'm not completely ruling it out. I just haven't seen a citation that isn't Islamic about, you know, this, burying their daughters alive. I would find it ridiculous if they did do that. And then if we look at some very significant figures in pre-Islamic Arabia, for example, Khadija, who was the wife of Muhammad, she was his first wife, and they were married before the advent of Islam. They were married when he was 25, and Islam was revealed when he was 40. She was a wealthy businesswoman. She was his employer. She had been married twice before, and she ran this empire. And after the advent of Islam and after her death, we don't really hear about women owning property and running businesses and having male employees that they could later sugar mama around, you know? You just don't hear it. I'm not trying to be funny. I'm being serious. It would be extremely surprising to me if it was just a case of people burying their daughters alive, or if it was a case of people performing eugenics, which was quite common in you know, tribal societies, in societies that were quite militarized, and there was a lot of warring going on, especially if the child was deformed or weak or sickly. It would come as a surprise to me if it was just women, where women had this freedom to choose who the father of their child was, and who could run whole businesses, employ male employees, actually propose to them, and things like that. And then I also state something like women were inherited against their will, and a man could marry a woman by force regardless of her age. I mean, I would still argue that while Islam does kind of give a woman consent to be married, I would still argue that the element of coercion and emotional blackmail and force still exists within an Islamic system. You're still not giving a woman free rein to choose the man she wants to marry, A, because she doesn't have full knowledge ever ever, because dating is not allowed in Islam, a woman can never fully know who she's marrying. And secondly, because her family, and I've experienced this personally when I was a Muslim and when I was living with my family, a family can really push you to marry somebody that you just don't want to marry for whatever reason. Oh, you'll never find somebody else. Oh, he's so wonderful, his mother will treat you right, you know. If you don't get married to him, you'll never get married again. You know, there are women who are much more beautiful than you, much older than you, who haven't found a husband, who have put their dreams in front of a man and are now struggling to get married and have kids. And these are the ways that people coerce you into that situation, and Islam doesn't exactly prohibit that. So, you know, and if you really want to talk about how women are treated in Islam, women are secondary in Islam to men. A woman has to obey her husband unless he goes directly against Allah and his messenger. She has to obey her husband. You know, there are narrations by Aisha, who's one of the wives of the Prophet Muhammad, where she goes, if you know, if there was anyone that a person could worship besides Allah, it would be a woman worshipping her husband, and things like that. You could, you know, there's something like, if I could pluck my eye out for my husband, I would. Things like that. People saying that in hadiths. In terms of other things, you know, Muhammad calls women deficient in intelligence in a hadith. In an authentic narration, he also says that women will be the majority dwellers of hell because they are ungrateful to their husbands. He says that they are deficient in their religion because of their periods, and on their periods they can't pray and they can't fast, so they're deficient in religion, and that they should give charity to make up for that, even though having a period is no woman's fault. And you are constantly made to feel shame because you are a woman and because you go through womanly things and you have womanly things about you, like your hair, like your breasts, like things like that. And I just like the audacity for anyone who has knowledge of this, you know, is aware of how women have freedom in the West and women have freedom in a lot of places in the world. You know, you have that, and then you would assert that Islam is better somehow, when it clearly isn't, because women are obviously subordinate. A man can beat his wife to discipline her if she is arrogant or if she is disobedient. You know, how is that a better position to be in than to be completely equal to a man? And I am by no means saying that we have achieved complete equality in the West. I think that we're in a good place. I would be maybe too bold to say that we've achieved complete equality, but it's miles ahead of Islam, which literally puts the man as the dominant figure in the house. So much so that a man can marry more wives than a woman can marry husbands, and a man can marry people of the book or Jews and Christians, but a Muslim woman has to only marry a man. There are so many differences between the rights that men have and the rights that women have in Islam that I'm just baffled by people who are adults and have gone through this and, you know, will assert that. It doesn't make any sense, especially women. I'm the most angry at women for doing that. And this is kind of part of the reason why I wanted to go through this and like completely just destroy what I did before. Because I'm truly ashamed that I wrote this and how toxic it is, but I was also a child. And there are fully grown adults asserting these things. Anyways, the next point that I brought up, I think I've missed a page? Have I missed a page? I don't know. The next thing that I brought up is the male hijab, that the Quran, I'm going to put my leg down here because it's got pins and needles. The Quran states that the believing men should lower their gaze, and a lot of people, men and women, in the Muslim circles, Muslim men and women, will claim that this is the male hijab, and it's mentioned before even female hijab is brought up. First of all, the whole fucking Quran is addressed to a man most of the time. Even in Surah An-Nisa, the chapter about women, it's addressing men. So of course it was going to mention the men first before mentioning the women. Of course it was. So that does no favors for you, because most of the Quran is addressing men. So say to the believing men to lower their gaze and to guard their modesty. And then it says, say to the believing women to lower their gaze and guard their modesty, and not to display their beauty and their ornaments, except what ordinarily appears thereof. I don't know what translation I use for this. I probably Sahih International or Yusuf Ali, because those were the ones that I mainly used. But I will say this, I have never seen in Iran and in Saudi Arabia right now, women are imprisoned for not wearing the hijab, for inciting any kind of dissent about the hijab, for fighting for women's rights in these countries, okay? And these are considered Islamic regimes, whether you are Sunni or whether you are Shia, okay, which are the two main sects in Islam. I have never once heard of a man being sent to prison, put to death, given any kind of fine or any kind of scrutiny for not lowering his gaze or looking at women. Even men who will criticize me for the way that I dress, for leaving Islam, for showing my hair, for showing my tits, whatever the hell. Even men who will criticize me, Muslim men, will come and criticize me after looking at me, after breaching their such a, you know, quote unquote male hijab. They will do that after breaching it, and they will have the audacity to tell me that I am a disgrace because I'm not wearing a hijab. Don't bring me male hijab when it's barely a thing. It is barely a fucking thing, okay? Stop saying it. Because while you may think in your brain it exists, it doesn't exist. It is an unrealistic expectation for anyone to just walk around with their face looking at the ground, first of all. And second of all, it is by no means held to the same standard that female hijab is. The actual covering of the body is. You know, all those rules that I listed out for wearing the hijab, that it had to be bland, it had to be opaque, it had to be loose. You don't have to follow any of that. All you have to do is look at the fucking ground, and you can't even do that. And you break it all the time, and then you will come to us women who have either left Islam or don't want to wear the hijab, and you'll roast the fuck out of us because y'all can't just look away. Like, that is all you are asked to do, but it is not held to the same standard as the female hijab is, and I'm so sick of hearing it. The next thing is the hijab criteria. So that's kind of what I brought up earlier. So there are a lot of people will call just a headscarf a hijab. Like, even what I just wore wasn't a hijab because my arms were showing. I'm wearing a full face of makeup. You know, I'm talking really loudly and really animatedly. That breaches the hijab, believe it or not. But in terms of the actual garment, there are 6 criteria. And for the woman, it has to cover everything but the face and the hands. Some madhabs, I think the Hanafi madhab, says that you can show your feet. But for most Sunni madhabs, I'm not entirely sure of Shias, but I think Shias have a similar criteria for the covering. It's everything but the face and the hands. Aside from that, there is also the criteria that it has to be loose and it can't reveal the figure. So it can't be sticking to your body. You can't like wear a belt to accentuate your waist. It has to be loose around the arms. It has to be loose around the legs. One of my other quite religious friends who went to school with me, she had also said that your hijab should be so loose that people shouldn't be able to tell that you have 2 legs. Like, that's how loose it should be. Except when the wind blows by and then you can see fucking everything. But yeah, so that's the second thing. The third thing is that it shouldn't be transparent or see-through, so it has to be completely opaque. It shouldn't be extremely glamorous, so no like sequins or embroidery or like really fancy bright fucking colors, like none of that. It shouldn't resemble the opposite gender, so it shouldn't be men's clothing, and it shouldn't contain symbols of the disbelievers, so like no crosses, no stars of David, no I don't know, other symbols that are associated to other religions. And I had said in that paragraph where I was discussing the criteria, and that is what hijab has to qualify to be a hijab. Like, that is what is qualified. I don't know specifically if you are punished for wearing a lesser hijab. There is no lesser hijab. This is a hijab. But a lot of people think that the hijab is just a wraparound headscarf. When we talk about hijab in Saudi Arabia, in Iran, in countries where it is enforced that a woman has to wear hijab, and sometimes in countries where it's not enforced but it is enforced by the community, especially conservative communities, it is a full erasure of the body. It is a complete covering. It is essentially a tent that you walk around in outside. In addition to this, you are not allowed to be loud, you are not allowed to sing because your voice is considered aura or something to cover. You are not allowed to, so one thing that my Islamic studies teacher used to warn us against was to buying like loud shoes. You are not allowed to make noise when you walk. You are not allowed to wear perfume. The Prophet Muhammad said that wearing perfume for a woman specifically is as though she has committed adultery or fornication. It's a lesser kind of adultery or fornication, because perfume is also lustful in some way. I don't know. You're not allowed to wear anklets because it's only prostitutes wear those. You're not allowed to pluck your eyebrows because Allah curses the women who both pluck eyebrows and have their eyebrows plucked. You're not allowed to change the shape of your teeth, specifically putting gaps in your teeth. I don't know of anyone who still does that, but it was something that they did at the time, and it's mentioned within the same narration as plucking your eyebrows. It is, and this is what people don't understand when I talk about the hijab, because that was very much a hijab that I had adopted. That was the kind of hijab that I was wearing. It is a complete erasure of your individuality. It is a complete removal of you as an individual. Instead, you are just a woman who is walking around. You are not a person with fun, exciting personality and who likes to wear certain things, who likes certain colors, who has a sense of, this sense of style, who can bond with other people. No, you are just a Muslim woman who is walking under a black shroud, and you are completely erased and removed from your individualism. And the only people that you can show your individualism to are people who can police you. It's your father, it's your husband, it's the other members of your family. These are people who will constantly limit you, and people that you have to obey. You have no option but to obey, because it is literally a sin not to obey. And I just want you to be in that mindset. Like, how it is like walking in a textile cage. That is what the hijab is, and that is what the hijab represents, and that's why I don't like it. In that paragraph, I say that in Britain, the minimum covering differs for men and women. Now, I want you to really think about that. Like in Britain, yes, we have different standards of minimum dress for men and women. So minimum dress for men would just be like bottoms, boxers, you know, you gotta hide the penis, hide the dick. For women, it's to cover your breasts and to cover your vagina, like your pubic region. You know, in bikinis or whatever, it's a different standard. But now consider the minimum standard for an Islamic state or under Islam. The minimum standard is for a woman to cover everything but her face and her hands, when a man only has to cover between his navel and his knees. Over the knees or under the knees, there's difference of opinion, it's not important. But the minimum that a woman has to cover in Islam is everything but her face and her hands. The reasons why women have to cover their breasts and their vagina in Britain is because they are considered sexual. I'm not going to get into the debate of whether or not it is. You know, there's a big debate around free the nipple, that's not why we're here. But they are considered sexual, and that's why we need to hide them. Now apply that same logic to Islamic law. Every single part of a woman's body, except for her face, debatably, because there are people who say that she has to cover her face, but we're going with mainstream opinion. A woman has to cover everything. Everything is sexual, but her face and her hands. Her hair is sexual. Her fucking weenus, the skin on her elbow, is sexual. Her wrists are sexual. Her ankle is sexual. Her knees are sexual. Every part of your body, but your face and your hands, and even those things are debatable, are sexual. That is the level that Islam goes to hide women's bodies and shame women's bodies. Moving on to the next point about the statistics that I read out, and I will not be reading them again. But I just want to say that while we do have several, thousands of rape cases in the West and in countries which are considered progressive, I would like to say that a lot of the cases are highlighted because they're reported. Many of the cases that happen in Muslim majority countries like Egypt, like Maldives, like Oman, like Syria, these cases are the ones that are reported. I don't know how many cases are happening without them being reported. In addition to this, marital rape in these countries is not considered rape. A man, Islamically, can ask his wife to have sex with him, and she is coerced not to refuse, because there are hadiths saying that if she does refuse him, then the angels will curse her until dawn, which assumes that sex only happens at night, but you know what I mean. The idea that a woman has to sleep for her husband is ingrained in these societies with narrations like this. In addition to all of this, if rape does happen in these countries, there is a huge amount of shame culture that goes on. There was an instance, and this is not that related but kind of related, there was an incident that happened in Pakistan where a girl suspected that she had breast cancer but was so ashamed of going to the doctor because the only doctor in the village was a man that she died of it. This kind of shame culture leads to these incidents happening within families, outside of families, by complete strangers. We hear of cases of uncles raping their nieces. We hear stepfathers raping their stepdaughters. We hear brothers raping their sisters. We hear these things. And also, older people raping children. And they go unreported because of shame culture, because the family hides it away. And this is completely unaccounted for in Muslim majority countries. And that is why these statistics, while they are quite interesting to look at from a distance, these statistics can never really be held against each other because there's too much margin for error here. And also, I would like to point out that some of the most religious countries, quote unquote, religious Muslim countries like Saudi Arabia and like Iran do not state how many rape cases happen in their country to the UN or to Amnesty International. I don't know about now, but back then they didn't. I remember really struggling to find Muslim majority countries who actually reported the cases that they were going on. This also doesn't account for the sizes of countries. For example, the Maldives is a fairly small set of islands, and comparing it to the US is a little ridiculous. There's way more people in the US than there is in Maldives. So yeah, those statistics and the math that follows, just completely disregard it. It's all inane garbage. The next thing is that I want to talk about is the punishment for rapists. So we've already talked about how there's shame culture in Islam and within the Muslim community, and the punishment for a rapist, even though I haven't specifically read it, I've only heard it from quote unquote learned people. I've only heard that a rapist, if proven to be a rapist, will get the death penalty. I don't personally agree with the death penalty, but I can kind of understand why that would be put in place, because Islam is so heavily involved with sex and controlling just that. I don't know why exactly, but it has this really cuckoldy mentality about sex. Like, you have to completely restrain yourself from it. And in my opinion, that creates more scenarios for rapists to be there. Like, the only reason why people would rape within their own families, for example, is because of how pent up they are, because they can't just go out and get that out from an outside source than their family, than people who are young and people who are impressionable and people who can be taken advantage of and are naive and don't know what's going on. I'm by no means trying to justify what these people are doing, because it is absolutely disgusting, but you can't deny that this way of living creates this awful situation for people. It creates these scenarios because you are completely, it's like caging an animal. Having sex is a very natural part of an adult life. It is a very normal thing for adults to do, and it's even healthy for adults to do. Maybe not too much and maybe not without protection, but it is something absolutely normal, and it is something absolutely, you know, natural, and it shouldn't be something that is so caged within people that they think to find these disgusting and horrible outlets to these things. I don't know if I'm making sense at this point, but I think you get the gist of what I'm saying. But moving on to the next point, we talk about segregation. Segregation is another part of hijab and hijab discussion. Men and women are not allowed to intermingle. In Surah An-Nisa, there is actually a list of people that a man is allowed to interact with, women that he's allowed to interact with, so members of his family, like his mother, his sister, his daughter, all of that stuff. And there's a list of women there's a list of men for women and who they're allowed to interact with. I'm sorry, I'm losing the plot at this point. But segregation is another element that factors into this. They are made to be completely separate, and I think this is why my opinion of men was so poor at this time. I must have been a little older than 14 or 15. I must have been 15, 16, or even 17 at this point. And my opinion of men was so low that I compared them to mindless zombies who just want to attack women. And it is disgraceful and it is disgusting, and I don't like it. I really hate it. And the one reason that I have for that is because I had never spoken to a man in my life outside members of my family. And because they were members of my family, I didn't view them as awful predatory men, even though some of them were, to me, personally. Even though some of them were. And because I was constantly fed this thing, if you don't wear the hijab, you're going to get raped. If you don't wear the hijab, men are going to take advantage of you. If you don't wear the hijab, you are going to be used and it's going to be completely your fault. This is why this narrative was built. And I think that so many Muslim women and Muslim just children, Muslim people in general, have such a poor opinion of themselves and of men, and that is what hijab and its culture does to people as a community. And this is the message that I want to bring to you on No Hijab Day, on World Hijab Day, 1st of February. I am by no means saying that you should take off the hijab if it is something that you are truly comfortable wearing. I am by no means saying that you should do anything besides what you feel you should do. But there is a big but that comes with this, and not that kind. If a woman wants to take it off, she should not be harassed, she should not be imprisoned, she should not be killed, she should not be abused in any way, shape or form. She should have full autonomy over what she wears and over how she chooses to cover or uncover her own body. And men should take responsibility for their own actions. Unlike how I used to think, I believe that men are free-thinking human beings just like women are, and you are capable of controlling your behavior just as women are. And I don't think that any woman, even if she's running around naked in the streets for whatever reason, she's just living her fucking life, I don't think a woman can do anything to deserve rape. And a man has no justification for raping a woman, or anyone for that matter. Women raping men, men raping women. You don't have a justification for doing that. Any justification. With that, thank you for watching this video. I hope it was entertaining. I hope it was informative. And I hope that you enjoyed it above all. And I hope that you learned something from it. I am done embarrassing myself for today. And I will hopefully see you in the next video. I may be doing a live stream today, so stay tuned. I will not look like this because I am recording on a Tuesday and this is going up on a Saturday. But we'll see. If you enjoyed this video, please do consider leaving a like, subscribing, sharing, commenting down below, you know, spreading the good message of don't wear hijab if you don't want to. And if you dislike this video, smash that dislike button, unsubscribe, roast me in the comments below, roast me on Twitter, let me know what you think. All my social media links are in the description below if you would like to support me in a more monetary fashion. I have a Patreon, I have a PayPal, and I have merch where you can buy wonderful t-shirts designed by yours truly. All of the artwork is done by me, and you can see my artwork on my Instagram. Again, everything is in the description below, and I will see you in the next video / live stream. Have a wonderful no hijab day, and goodbye.